Hi people, welcome to Blue UK Jazz Dance. One of the key things is I'm renowned for creating projects that raise the prestige, the status, the profile of African and African Caribbean culture, African American culture, African diaspora culture. I created this project in 1981. I want to give people insight. The whole idea of the project is to promote the positive images and energy of my African Caribbean heritage arts, music, dance, drama, visual arts, its traditions and culture, as well as to provide fun, explore issues in an unthreatening way, nurture personal development, raise cultural and social awareness through issue-based work, develop communication skills and team building skill, instill self and community pride via legacy and heritage exhibitions, website, wider social media, promotions, performances, workshops, open stages, panel speaking, dance club promotions, mixed movement events and programs, collaborating with artists, etc. This is an up-to-date core mission of what I do with Dance in Spirit Jazz Project. Well, I identified a long time ago to students. As a student, a YTS student, I was part of a program called Students Empowering Students. People from internationally were coming to the UK and they had stereotypes about each other. So one of the key things I created was I shaped people's focus by identifying that cultures here, we don't know each other because we don't actually share relevant cultural information. Most cultures come here looking for a British education, and that's the education that they walk in. And British students don't generally look outside their culture. They're very naive, very focused. In their lives, they come into this world with stereotypes. And I created a project called Student Empowering Students. Art is empowering students. Art is empowering community. Students empowering communities. And people were shocked when I created that project because they had a perception of me. So I said to people, write down your perception of me. What do I do in my recreational time, my leisure time? Am I political? Am I culturally aware? What do I do in my spare time? What do I do to chill out? What do I do to relax? And what does music and dance mean to me? What does dance mean to me? And what dance mean to you? And it was a challenging question. And it was all around leadership. And one of the key things was I smiled because I knew that most people, 99.9% of people, had a total stereotype about me. They was unaware that, first of all, my dad was Jamaican, mum's Grenadian, that they have a heritage. My mum comes from a totally different history. They didn't even know nothing about Grenada, nothing about Jamaica. Just the stereotypes. That's what they held, because none of them ever been to Jamaica. None of them ever been to the Caribbean. Most people, they associated dance with us as something that's a fad and insignificant, not health and well-being. As an individual, I was aware that our African culture gave an understanding of the Caribbean culture that we had. And what happened was people were unaware that African had its own mythology, just like Britain has its own mythology. And that Brazilian mythology and Caribbean mythology is related to African mythology by the nature of slavery. Do you understand? The nature of colonialization. And people couldn't see that. So we had something called African retentions. Anyway, I created this project talking about our parents, all of us in this room, dance in the spirit of jazz best values. Because jazz impinges people's everyday values, their social values, physical, intellectual, cultural, emotional, political, economic, technological, environmental, legal. Because from the day jazz was actually invented, it was created as a revolutionary subculture to give people a voice of who they were, about basically people self-expressing themselves as a free people in a oppressed society. Do you understand? And what happened was people started to become revolutionaries with the jazz when people started to identify their art form as something that's not an art form and started to stereotype it as something that's in fad and significant. When people knew it had come out of extreme racism, come out of extreme stereotyping, labeling, it come from extreme circumstances, jazz. And it was a voice of a free, oppressed people seeking a better quality of life. This is what it's about. Our music, since the day slavery happened, our music and colonialization happens, always been about us being free and liberated. And one of the key things, escaping from the trauma that we faced. Because people don't take on the trauma that people have faced within slavery, the trauma that people experienced within colonialization. I did as an individual. That's why I started to talk about, I created the project to say, look, you know nothing about this culture. This culture gave us benefits, and you don't know that because you don't know the culture. You just stereotype the culture. Carte blanche. People have stereotyped me, I know, for most of my life. And the number one area I've been carte blanche stereotyped because I had special education needs. Anywhere I go in the world, if I told anybody special education needs, I'd be stereotyped. Because I came from the slums of Moss Side, I was stereotyped. Because I'd known as West Indian immigrant, and it's important people when I speak today in 2019, going on to 2020, I talk on from a perspective of how West Indian immigrants were seen. How immigrants were seen. They were seen as people that you could use and abuse, especially the unskilled. And my mother and father were unskilled, but were not unintelligent. They came here with values, and them values is amazing. When I set up Dancing the Spirit of Jazz Leadership, my parents said to me, education can take you around the world, but manners can take you around the world, and talent and gifts can take you around the world if you use them. Because that's what got me around the world. It wasn't education that got me around the world. It was my talents and gifts with the manners and social etiquette that my parents had taught us. The self-management my parents brought into my life, to be focused, to have a hard work ethic, to respect other cultures, seek to improve yourself. Don't let barriers don't let barriers stop you from achieving your objectives. So from the beginning, what happened was I was renowned as a child with special education needs, but always, like the film The King's Speech, I was always looking for out of the blue, out of the box ways to develop myself. Because when you're special education needs child, what happened, my own parents with special education needs, the way they got taught, they never went to school, so high school, so they told me, try experiment. So experimenting was a big thing in my family, and it's a big thing in the black community, because that's how most people who don't have money learn. To find somebody who knows something about a subject and experiment. Do you understand? So self-learning was huge in my life. Self-leadership is huge in my life. And what happened is Dancing the Spirit of Jazz Leadership is a lot about that. Individuals who saw themselves didn't limitate themselves to their learning. And so the whole idea is about me as an individual dancing the spirit of jazz. It developed my leadership skills,